Welcome to the Dungeon Coach Plays. I'm the Dungeon Coach, and this is my homebrew campaign from scratch based around my characters' backstories that I wanted to build and put on the second channel. The algorithm doesn't like some of this type of stuff, and I wanted to be able to give this behind-the-scenes look at literally me playing the game with all this craziness that's been going on. I'm able to play now, and I want to give you guys a unique perspective. There's a lot of stuff out there from the audience perspective and from the player's perspective, but not any that I've seen from the Dungeon Master's perspective. So this is this campaign as told from my perspective. I'm going to tell you the behind the scenes of what's going on. The players have no idea of some of the stuff that's going on. You're going to be on this journey with me to watch whatever the heck the players do. I'm going to give you my insights before the sessions, what happened during them, some adjustments I had to make on the fly, lots of different stuff. So I'm excited to show that. Down in the description will be the playlist to each of these. I'm going to be posting every single week. My patrons get early access to all videos as soon as I upload them. I film these videos immediately after the session every week. We're 9 sessions in at the time of filming this video. So patrons get early access to that, and they get early access to my Notion, which is my DM binder for this entire thing that I have all of it logged in there. A lot of different homebrew stuff, a lot of different mechanics in there. Keep trying to add on more rewards to say thank you for the monthly support I get over on Patreon on top of all those PDFs and stuff. So thank you for that. So now with all of that out of the way, let's dive into the world of Korin, made up entirely for this whole situation. So a lot of the lore from D&D is going to be different, going to be changed to fit this world and the story that I'm wanting to tell with my players, because I did build this from scratch from their backstories. I came to the table with nothing. I was completely open to what they wanted to do, and this is what was created. So the video is going to be posted next week. It's going to be the session 0 to this. So you're going to see, if you see this whole thing, you're going to see the session 0 where my head was at before I created this, which may not be another cool thing to get a different, unique insight into this whole process. So here we go. The world is called Korin, and the campaign is called The Rift of Nations, which will make sense here in a minute. I have my whole notes here for the entire thing. I did this whole outline to try and give you guys the big picture all in once, because it's a lot to take in, but you're going to want to know all of this to see the inner workings of what's going on whenever I say certain things in these follow-up videos. So we're going to go 120 years into the past from the current time where the players are in the campaign. And this is all the stuff the players have no idea about. They're starting to get some ideas, but the players started the campaign off knowing not this. I'll tell you what the players knew starting it, but I'm telling you guys what I know, again, from the DM perspective. So back 120 years ago, there were 10 nations, 10 different nations, all of the different types of terrain too: desert, the coastal nations, forest nation, island nations, mountain nations, all the different types of nations. And you could literally look, the Ranger terrain list was one of the things I got inspiration from. There were 10 nations, and they each lived alone, completely isolated, and struggled kind of fending for themselves, not everybody together, not trusting anyone, kind of keeping to themselves in their own isolated terrestrial type environments. So problems hit, the Great Depression type stuff. Things were getting bad. Food was becoming scarce. So the leaders of these nations came together to try to form a pact of some way to be able to work together for the first time ever, and put all of their worries and fears aside about what could possibly be backstabbed, because things weren't looking good. Their backs were kind of against the wall, so they reached out in this moment to form what is known as the Wondrous Accord. That's very important. All of them shared the resources with each other. They came together with the hopes and dreams, that's important too, of a better future and possibilities of what they could accomplish together instead of apart. They shared a single crystal in the center, and all the leaders from all across the lands came together as one. There was a central crystal that they had in the middle of this meeting room. They all kind of shared what they could each provide for each other, the problems they could each solve. Like, oh, we know how to irrigation, water. We could combine this. We have that. Coming together to solve all these problems. Little did they know that this pact that they were making with each other was a magical pact. Because there is some other things going on, some planar things type going on. I wanted to add a little bit of magic over this campaign, because the campaign's theme was armies at war, nations at war, clashing kingdoms, headbutting each other. But it wasn't always like that. And I wanted to have some sort of magical air. This is fantasy. We are playing D&D and everything. So I have a dream realm that's going on. And so here's the Dream Realm. The Quarry and the Lavishtar. This is inspired by some Eberron lore that I've taken and kind of ran with. So this is not one of the things like, oh, that's wrong. This is I am homebrewing this with that as the inspiration. But this is basically dreams and nightmare. The Quarry are the dreams, symbolizing hope and possibility and innovation and inspiration. And the Lavishtar are the nightmare type things, fear, anxiety, worry, all that kind of stuff. And this is again my own personal adaptation. The Dream Realm is in a constant struggle for power between those two, dreams and fear. Their power comes from those in the material plane, but neither of them can act on the plane. They can only inspire and affect the plane through the people. So in their dreams and whenever they're asleep, if you follow your dreams, classic phrase, follow your dreams. If people follow their dreams and chase after what they want and innovate and come up with, that moment that we all get inspiration from, that's the Quarry inspiring the people in the material plane. Oh my gosh, like breakthroughs and ideas, that's where that comes from, right? That feeling that we've all had before. And then on the other side of that, fear. When you follow your fears, whenever you give in to your fears and worries and you barricade your doors because you're worried about this, and you act on your fears and you hold yourself back in a way out of fear of your nightmares and other things that you get, that is when the Lavishtar gets stronger. So this struggle back and forth between them has gone on for a long time, which we'll get into in a second. The dreamers get power from the people that they inspire. Nightmares get power from the people that they fear. That's the whole concept there. But their influence on the material plane has always been in a cycle of an ebb and flow back and forth. This mirrors on the material plane with the highs and lows of life itself. And like I said, the Great Depression type times when everything's great and everything's not great. And this cycle that keeps continuing. It usually ends up turning into this big buildup and then a switch in power, from going from a time of great possibility and then shifting hard. When things going well, then there's a shift. But we'll get into all that buildup and switch around here in a second, because the dream energy, whenever those come together and follow your dreams, all these 10 nations, this is a big deal for the dream world, the Quarry, the hopes and dreams. All these 10 nations from across the world are coming together for hope and to put aside their fears of being backstabbed and come together and trust each other and hope for a better future. That's the most, I just got chills a little bit. That's the most dreamlike energy that is infused into this crystal. They shatter the crystal and give each fragment to each of the 10 nations. And that crystal is what they kind of hold on as a memory. Again, they had no idea that there was magic involved with this pact that they made with each other. The Wondrous Accord is what it's called. Each leader takes the crystal back to the nations, and they have a huge surge of positive dream energy coming from these crystals. And these crystals, separated out into their different nations, start to have innovations coming from each of these different nations. Each of the 10 nations, which I'm going to get into now in this lovely chart I have here, they each had an inspiration that they started to come up with and be inspired to create. So the Desert Nation started to do intense amounts of glass blowing and be able to manipulate glass and lenses, and solar magic, things where they could harness the energy from the sun. And I know solar panels is like a very tech thing nowadays, but this is like the medieval equivalent of a crystal that could harness the energy from the sun and use that power, but then it would get depleted at night and have to wait for the sun to get back. So in my campaign, there's certain magic items that only work during the day, and this is a really cool thing to kind of weave in there. But again, those magic items came from this lore. So that's the Desert Nation. The Island Nation, we're very familiar with aqueducts and how to shunt water and shuttle water from one place to another, and water magic. So if you see, there's a a mundane glass, and then solar energy, and then there's aqueducts and water magic. So I've tried to give each nation some sort of innovation that was also connected to magic in some way and something more mundane in some way. And the water magic is literally like water magnets, being able to push back water and repel water, and then attract water and help accelerate flows through these aqueducts. That's the Island Nation. The Swamp Nation was medicinal herbs, being able to heal and mend things with literally like herbalism type stuff, being able to make healing potions and other things, and even just not in a magical sense, just in an absolutely curing diseases and stuff with different types of herbal remedies. And then they had animal magic, being able to manipulate animals and dominate and control animals in some sort of way, not in necessarily negative ways, maybe calming animals and being able to interact with them, magically speak to them even. That was the Swamp Nation. All of these nations also have actual names, but I'm going to refer to them as their land type, so it's a little easier for y'all to wrap your heads around instead of calling them by their actual names. Blacksmithing and manipulating metals and stuff was their blacksmithing that they were known for. Thermal magic, dealing with both keeping heat in and pushing heat out, like any type of heat transfer of things. I'm talking magical sleeping bags, if you want to think of it like that. And across the board with lots of different things of being able to manipulate heat in or out of things was their little magical twist there. The Hilltop Nation was navigation, compasses. They figured out how to create compasses, how to use compasses, how to chart stuff, cartography, all that kind of stuff. And then fire magic, being able to initiate and snuff out fires and flames. All this traveling type stuff. If you think about the theme of that would just be traveling across the lands. Then we have now, those are 5 nations. Those are 5 nations that I've told you first for a reason, because those nations, at the start of the campaign, the players had no idea about any of those 5 nations. At the start of the campaign, the players only thought there were 5 nations. I described it as there only being 5 nations. They were from the Tech Nation, and like an artificer type, mechanical gear tinkering type nation. That's where they were from, or that's where they were picking up the campaign at. And I told them that there were 5 nations. The 5 I just told you, they have no idea about, right? So the 5 nations that the campaign started off with: Forest Nation. They are known for terraforming, literally terraforming, like being able to shift the earth, like you've seen in some of these like ancient Aztec things that we can see on like the Discovery Channel and stuff, of people manipulating the land in really cool ways. That's terraforming. And they had nature magic to be able to control plants and grow plants, flowers, vines, the earth itself, right? Or sorry, plants itself, not the earth, because the earth was the mountain nation. Steam engines, like steampunk type things, classic dwarven type stuff there for that, and earth magic, being able to actually move the actual earth itself tectonically. And then the next one is the coastal nation, which is boats and stuff, right? That would be water. The island nation was more so underwater type stuff. The coastal nation is more so boats and the winds of sailing and stuff like that. So their magic was wind, and their boats, or their mundane thing, were boats, and they were a sailing nation, right? Grasslands Nation is the largest nation by far of any of the other ones. They are the dominant kingdom in this whole thing. I'll show you a map here in a second. And agriculture was their just general being able to grow crops and be able to harvest that type of stuff, which also combines the animals in some way, kind of from the Swamp Nation with their animals. That could be useful there. The Forest Nation with all their nature stuff could be useful here. So you see how they start to kind of overlap a little bit. And the Grasslands mastered arcane magic, actual tapping into the weave and just your classic arcane type magic. And then the final nation, which is the nation that most of the campaign is taking place in right now, is the Tech Nation, the nation of Aldor. All of these nations have actual names again. This is, they were inspired by tech, machinery, tinkering, metals that shift, kind of like Iron Man type stuff, metals that shift and move and be able to articulating metals to be able to wear and fashion armor better, stuff like that, even in a mundane way. And then their magical thing was enchanting, and merging enchanting with tech type things. The Tech Nation created Warforged. The Tech Nation created Warforged. I know Warforged is a race in Dungeons and Dragons, but not here. The Warforged were created by the Tech Nation. This inspiration that we could create automaton-like entities and be able to, and they had this huge breakthrough with all this dream magic from the dream crystals that had spread out throughout the 10 kingdoms, separating out, and they created Warforged. And as an act of coming together, as an act of peace to everyone, each nation got their own Warforged. So the Tech Nation created 10 Warforges, one for themselves and one for every other nation. This is very, very important because one of the players is a Warforged, which we'll get into that in a second. So they created these Warforged almost like a nuclear deterrent. These were dormant Warforges sitting there, deactivated, right? And each nation had one, and if they were under attack or for whatever other reason they wanted to, they could activate their Warforged, and it would be almost like another reason to not fight each other, because they could activate your Warforged, then you'd have to activate your Warforged, then you don't have your Warforged for when other people could attack. So it's just kind of like they created this as a peace offering and almost like a stalemate to offer everyone a nuclear deterrent in the form of this Warforged thing, right? But one of the players is a Warforged. So how's that going to work? Also in this world, each of those 10 nations have 10 different races that are associated with them. This is not exclusive where you're not in each nation only has different races and it's all segregated like that. None at all. This is just where each of them came from, where they hailed from, where a majority of that race would be. So in the tech nation, we're gnomes, of course. Of course, how can it not be gnomes? Tinkering and stuff. The grasslands nation are humans. Of course, it's the wide and most large. The coastal nation are elves. That was a little bit of a weird one, but I wanted to make sure that I fit in each of these all throughout this whole thing, because in this campaign, there are 10 different races, and that's kind of where I kind of kept it for this campaign. I let my players choose first. Again, I built this campaign around them, so they chose what their races were, and then I built this, right? So it was open for them. I'm not restricting things off just for no reason. Mountain nation was dwarfs. Forest nation, dryads, which is like a watered down version of a dryad. It's not like, they didn't have hooves. They don't have anything like that. Nothing crazy. No fawns or anything like that. It's just nature people. They had green skin, darker green hair, and they have a little bit of sway over the nature itself. Hilltop nation were halflings. Cold nation were Goliaths. Swamp nation were shifters, which is basically like a druid. You could shapeshift into animals in some capacity, right? No one in the party was a druid. Nobody had the desire to shapeshift like that. So I gave it to a race of people in the world. The island nation, underwater swimmer people, merfolk. Perfect. But this was like again, watered down version of it. They had, blue skin. They almost looked like water elves, if you want to describe it like that. And then the desert nation were Kalashtar. Kalashtar is a race in Dungeons and Dragons. It is I altered it a little bit. They have white hair, yellow eyes, darker skin, and they're connected to the dream world. Ooh, interesting how that works. One of the players is a Kalashtar, and there we go. So the races are important, the different inspiration. There's the big picture of what all of the nations had. But again, only the players only know that there were 5 nations. Now that the stage is set, we enter into what is called the Great Betrayal. The Great Betrayal, there's a flood from the Hilltop Nation. All of these nations came together, right? They came together in the hopes and dreams of a better future. They all the different tech that I just listed off, they combined them and helped them to form what's called Omnia, this massive system of irrigation to the entire continent of the world. In fact, here's the world. Boom. This is the entire thing. You see Shagra is the grasslands, Aldor is tech, Galger is the forest nation, Sinnoh up top there is the coastal nation, and Dratun is the mountain nation. But you will see the other nations aren't labeled. You have the cold in the bottom right there. You have the island nation that's now sunken off to the left. The hilltop nation is where it says Muck Crater right there. And the desert nation is in that little peninsula in the bottom right. And then underneath Galger in that swampy little land down there is where the swamp nation is. So you see the map that I made in Incarnate. Super great to kind of get the big picture there to show the players. But I didn't label any of that stuff. This is the world. You see this. In fact, when the campaign first started, I gave the players a partial map, which we'll get into in a little bit. So all these different nations, they needed to get water and supplies all to each other. So they came all together to combine and make this huge irrigation system of water from the island nation's technology to shuttle water through tunnels built by the tech nation that had articulating metal in the tech nation and was energized by the steam engines from the mountain nation that had steam engines. But how did you heat the water for the steam? You had the desert nation's light crystals on top of it charging in the sun to heat the water to create and push through everything else. And the agriculture, the grasslands dug all the trenches to try and get like you see all these nations coming together to be able to make this happen, right? But there was a great betrayal, which is the biggest thing, which caused the shift, the positive energy shift into negative energy from the dream realm and stuff like we talked about. So the Great Betrayal was in the Hilltop Nation, which you saw was the Muck Crater type situation. Okay, there was a large gathering of water there. There's a huge basin of water that all of the technology helped to get everything shuttled together. So there's a high place of water, especially to get to the desert nation and also to irrigate and get to other places around the world. But there was a flood. Something happened and there was a flood. And you can even see the flood here. At Mutt Crater, you see that flood go downwards and pour into Galjur. You see it rip through the center of Galjur, and there was a massive flood wiping through all of the Forest Nation, ending in the Swamp Nation, eradicating a lot of people. Thousands upon thousands of people died in this flood. It was a huge, massive flood. It was like an inland tsunami that came from this mountaintop and poured through the Forest Nation and Swamp Nation, taking them all out. And now, whose fault was it? Who did this? Who turned on the Forest Nation and the Swamp Nation? So, the Archdruid of the Forest Nation, Abraxas, the first character that you're seeing here. And Abraxas is what you could consider to be the BBEG, but you'd be wrong. You'll see why. The Archdruid is the leader of the Forest Nation, and they saw the waters destroy everything. Families, their own family, Abraxas's family, as he's trying to stop this water and try and get any sort of magic that he can do to stop it. It's just too much, and it takes out the entire nation, and his family dies. The entire civilization, the Forest Nation as a whole, gets swept through, and it continues on into the Swamp Nation, and there's Swamp Nation casualties as well. Abraxas went mad with his theories of who did this, who was plotting against him. Was it the Desert Nation? The Desert Nation, Island Nation, and Hilltop Nation. It had to be those three. The Hilltop Nation is where all that water was gathered. The Island Nation is who was able to get the water there, and the Desert Nation is who needed all of this water. They need so much water, because of the Desert Nation, that they were the ones that plotted this, and his mind just starts going crazy with all this negative energy that had been there, but there had been more positive energy to quiet that voice, and these Lavishtar from the Nightmare Realm trying to tap into and get into his mind to make him act on those fears. So Abraxas came up with a plan to attack the Desert Nation because they were betrayed. The Forest Nation was, when really, no one was betrayed, which I'll get to in a second. So came up with a plan to attack the Desert Nation. So the Forest Nation and Swamp Nation came together to attack the Desert Nation. But they wanted to use the Forest Nation's Warforged. But Claudius stopped Abraxas. Who's Claudius? So Claudius is the advisor to Abraxas, the second in command. He's his loyal advisor to the Archdruid. Claudius is a very important NPC, which you'll see. So Claudius did not want him to attack. He's like, no. Like, this is not, we don't know who did this. And he was trying to be the voice of reason, but Abraxas lost it. He saw his own family die, was torn apart, and was not in a place to be reasoned with. Abraxas and Claudius shared the key to access their Warforged. Abraxas had the stone, the Dream Crystal. The Dream Crystal, by the way, was the key to activate those Warforged. If you take the Dream Crystal and place it into the chest of the Warforged, it activates, right? And that's what happens upon activation. And also another thing with Warforged, once the Warforged was activated, there's a massive pulse that goes out, and it scans everyone around it in a large area around it, and it becomes the average personality of the mass populace, which is a strange thing. So if there's a vast majority of people believe in a certain thing, are happy, are afraid, are evil, good, whatever type of personality traits you want to assign here, it becomes the average of everyone all together, which I think is an interesting way of handling this personality. It becomes the people in the most poetic way, I guess, possible, is whoever these people are, this Warforged becomes them in an interesting way. But you'll see what happens with this player here. So I did that because if the populace is a negative populace, that's a selfish populace, this Warforged that comes out would be synced up with them. If they're good, open, possibility, all that kind of stuff, it's going to be synced up with them. So in order to, kind of like the nuclear deterrent analogy, Abraxas had the crystal and Claudius had the location of where the Warforged was, and basically the key to get to the physical body of the thing. So together they would be able to activate it. But Claudius was like, no, Abraxas, this is not something you should do. So he hid the Warforged, and he took the Warforged to the Swamp Nation. To try and reason with the advisors there, which the leaders of the Swamp Nation were a coven of 3 witches, and there was one good, one neutral, one evil, just for the full spectrum of the D&D alignment there. He went and talked to the good witch. Sounds like a Wizard of Oz for a second here. The good witch's name is Korin, another very important NPC that you'll see why later. All of these are connected to the players, by the way. So, in fact, I'll go ahead and say it now. The Forest Nation's Warforged, this Warforged that Abraxas is trying to activate but is being taken away, the Forest Nation Warforged is one of the players. Interesting. The Barbarian Q is one of the players. That's one huge curveball there. Second one, Claudius, this druid, is the Artificer's pet cat. He is a druid that can shapeshift, and he shapeshifts into a cat, and you'll see what happens there in a second. But a very huge player that is now part of this player's backstory that all they told me is they have a magical cat. Little do they know that magical cat is actually a druid that's stuck in a cat form and had its memory wiped. Again, we'll get to that in a second. You see how I'm trying to weave this all together. And Korin is the grandmother of Q the Barbarian, which, how is this going to happen? She's a witch and he's not even activated yet. Okay, let's get back into it. So Claudius, the advisor to Abraxas, the leader of the Forest Nation, lost his mind. Take this to the witches and talk to Korin and be like, we need to reason with them. We can't. The other witches weren't having it. They went with Abraxas to fight the Desert Nation. They fell into that temptation and fear, and they went and fought back against who supposedly had lashed out against them. So in this, Claudius and Korin both take whatever they possibly can. They hide the Warforged and they try and go stop him. So Abraxas entered, did the whole Trojan horse type bit or the Thor Ragnarok get help that Loki and Thor do, where Abraxas reached out to the Desert Nation, said, we are injured greatly from this flood. We need shelter. We need to be able. Can we come to you? And they said, yes. No, come. It's fine. Come. And so they opened their doors. They let them into the city, and they had this whole Trojan horse type moment where the Forest Nation, the Swamp Nation took their Warforged, the Swamp Nation's Warforged. The two witches took it and took the Dream Crystal along with it into the center of the Desert Nation. The Desert Nation, for the record, did nothing. They did not betray these people. No one has been betrayed. And this is when I'll say this. The Great Flood was an accident. No one's fault. It was happenstance from everything coming together. There had been a lot of rain that year. The moon was extremely high, which we'll get to the moon here in a second if you know anything about the lycanthropy situation that's about to happen. The moon was in a certain cycle, very high, pulling up some of the waters. Lots and lots of rain. It was a high rain season. The water was built up higher than it really should have been. Some of the tectonic, which is actually the Forest Nation. The Forest Nation's in charge of the terraforming, and there was some terraforming on the side that was a little weaker and needed to be reinforced. But there's a lot of things going on. And so if there's any fault, it would be the Forest Nation's fault of not terraforming correctly there. But a lot of things came together and a natural disaster happened. And they started pointing fingers and blame, which was the Lavistar getting into their heads, right? So it's no one's fault. No one's been betrayed. But the true betrayal, the true Great Betrayal, is Abraxas and the Swamp Nation and whatever's left over of the Forest Nation turning on the Desert Nation, entering into the center of the Desert Nation. The Swamp Nation activates their Warforged, and with all the negativity in the hearts of the Swamp Nation and all the negativity in the hearts of the Forest Nation was a negative, negative energy inspired, nightmare energy infused Warforged. And that moment, as soon as they activated the Warforged and turned on the city, and from the center attacked out, I just got chills again, destroyed and decimated the entire Desert Nation. The Desert Nation did not see it coming. They had no defenses up. They were bringing in people that thought that they were helping. And that was the Great Betrayal. Abraxas turning on the Desert Nation and taking it out from the inside was the Great Betrayal. And that moment broke the Wondrous Accord. And that magical energy that had been infused into that pact was broken. And that's whenever the nightmare energy, the Lavistar, the shift happened from all this positivity and the shift into chaos where it snapped. That was the linchpin that reset everything. So the Abraxas's heart, Abraxas's body, mind was infused with this nightmare energy. It going into this whole. He was a druid. He's an archdruid. So this curse was put upon from this shift and this nightmare energy. Cursed the Forest Nation and the Swamp Nation. The Forest Nation was cursed with the rot, is what I'm calling it in this campaign. It is a nasty water-based, plant-based disease that can get into plants, animals, people, everything. Has different effects. I have a whole different side thing about rot and how it affects this cursed disease. And then the Swamp Nation, the nation of shifters, the shapeshifters like druids, right? Where do you think I'm going with this? The moon, the swamp shifting nation, they were cursed with lycanthropy, an extension and exaggeration of their shape shifting in a twisted humanoid form. They were shifters into normal animals. They would shift into dogs, cats, wolves, deer, whatever. But now no longer could they shift into these innocent little forms of animals. It was now pure blown, cursed, uncontrollable lycanthropy. Extremely powerful, and with all of this power and all of this negative nightmare energy, they completely wiped out the desert nation, wiping it off the map. So as all of this is happening and all of this chaos ensues, this rift is cut into the nightmare realm. And this massive act of betrayal, after so long, 100 years of peace, was broken and betrayed. And this act literally tore a rift but in the material plane leading into the nightmare plane, this nightmare realm of things. And this energy is now bleeding into the material plane from this great act of a betrayal. But this huge pulse of energy shot out across the world. This rift, this nightmare pulse, or this, I think I call it a nightmare ripple, went out from this central moment in the desert nation. And as it extends out and reaches, it starts to change things. The entire desert nation is wiped clean from everyone's minds, which is starting to be this weird connection that dreams have to memory. And you know how you wake up sometimes and you can't remember your dream, or you wake up and you don't remember you had a nightmare. You had a nightmare, but you can't really put your finger around it. There is a strange connection to memory and dreams and nightmares. And I wanted to kind of wrap that into this whole thing. So the desert nation becomes forgotten about, literally wiped off the face of the earth in their own minds, right? So this ripple that passes out, it crosses over people. There's an intelligence saving throw, wisdom saving throw, whatever, that goes off of it. I think that I have this be an intelligence saving throw because it has to do with memory. And I really think that intelligence saving throws and tied to memory, I think is a little bit stronger connection there. And intelligence saving throws are underused anyway, right? But if this nightmare ripple passes over you, imagine like a bomb going off in this little dome of purple energy, just expanding out in all directions across the entire world of Korin. Everyone forgets that there ever was a desert nation. And now it's just this strange place with mirages and these weird twisted magics where the sand dunes and the mirages of things that you see out in the desert, you just kind of get lost and you loop back and it kind of spits you back out where you came from. And you can never really navigate through the desert nation because this nightmare realm is protecting itself from being found out about, right? Kind of like the wall in Game of Thrones, where all the White Walkers are north of the wall. No one ever knows it's coming, but they're building up. They're building up. They're building up. And this building of these nightmare forces to be unleashed on the world as more negativity happens. This is the true BBEG of the campaign. This negativity of fear and nightmare is building and building and building in this rift in the desert nation, but no one knows about it. Everyone's forgotten about it because of the pulse ripple that went out, and you can't fight something you don't know about, which is the whole point of why the lavish star nightmare energy doesn't want to be known about or found out about. So Abraxas is not done. He has more. The desert nation didn't come clean. They didn't say that they did it. He has to be the hilltop nation or the island nation. So then he goes in a tirade. So now, for the next 20 years of this story, 120 years ago was the Wondrous Accord. There was 100 years of peace before this moment happened, right? This moment happened with the Great Betrayal. The Great Betrayal not being the flood, which most people think it's the flood. The players think it's the flood. Somebody caused the flood, and that was the betrayal. No. It was Abraxas turning on the desert nation. That was the Great Betrayal. For the next 20 years, up to the point of where the campaign's happening right now, I'm going to go through a little bit faster so that you can kind of see the big picture of this and we can get into the actual concurrent time of the campaign. So in the temple in the desert nation is called the Temple of Dreams. And at the center of the desert nation is where the spawning point for the nightmare army is that's growing in the material plane, like we just talked about. Abraxas continues his assault out against the island nation and literally goes to the island nation, and his nation was flooded. And with this infusion power from the brand new power of this nightmare energy coming to him, he pulls the island nation underwater and becomes an Atlantis of sorts. But kills everybody in the process. And that again forges this rift, and this starts to happen. And then he goes to the Hilltop Nation, and then he just starts to go on this rampage. Oh, I almost forgot this. Claudius and Korin were kind of following Abraxas. They couldn't act against him because they knew he'd be way too powerful. But in the aftermath, the Swamp Nation Warforged was killed in the battle in the middle of the Desert Nation. The Desert Nation was caught off guard, but they didn't stand a chance. But the Swamp Nation Warforged was killed in that battle. Claudius was able to go and harvest at least a little bit of that Swamp Nation crystal, so he keeps that little Swamp Nation dream crystal on him, and he holds on to it. But he's following Abraxas. He sees that Abraxas goes to the Island Nation and knows that the Hilltop Nation's next, so they go to warn the Hilltop Nation. And they gather all of the strongest allies possible into a group known as the Keepers. And there's a nightmare pulse that happens after the Island Nation falls, but the Swamp Nation's dream crystal, being around in this spot, helps them have a chance to make the save against this memory wipe. And the people around Claudius holding this dream crystal in this proximity, the Keepers, they remember. And everyone else around them, there's no Island Nation. There's not Island Nation. What are you talking about? But they remember, and they know what Abraxas is up to, so they're going to try and stand against them at the Hilltop Nation. So they awaken the Hilltop Nation Warforged to fight against Abraxas. And then so it's this coming together, and this is the first time that they've all kind of this coming together of nations has happened. This is a very important key to the theme of this campaign. One of the things that I want my players to have to do to be able to beat this thing is unite all of the nations, past and present. Bring them all back together to stand against this fear and this nightmare thing. And that's kind of the theme of the campaign, of this like hope and possibility of dreams of coming together and accomplishing something you couldn't do before through trust and fighting your fears and stuff, right? So this was done. This is now where I have the 10 nations and who stood together as part of the 7 keepers. Alrod, who is Clara's father. Clara is the artificer. The artificer, which, I'm going to have a video also linked down in the description to all the characters' backstories and how they all fit into this, and you'll see where some of the inspiration came from for this entire world. So Alrod, who is Clara's father, again, tying it all to the players and and weaving it through the players. She has no idea that her dad was one of the people that stood against Abraxas, much less who Abraxas is, much less who, you get the idea. And then there was Crush, which was one of the immortals from the Mountain Nation. It's one of their it's like their elite SWAT team. And then there's Romulus, which was the Hilltop Nation's actual Warforged. They activated the Warforged, and that was one of the people that stood against it too. There's another one, a merfolk sorcerer named Shale. Xander, who is a Kalishtar, like a mental casting scion type person. Again, you'll see why this is important here in a second. Hemlock, who's a halfling ranger, and Claude, who is the a successor to Abraxas, or the assistant to Abraxas. If you look at each of these 7 people and think of the 10 nations, each of them come from somewhere, and the Tech Nation was where Clara's father came from. So of all the 7 people I just listed off, you take a big step back and look at the 10 nations and see what representation there were from each nation, because the whole thing is, in order to stop this, like I said, the theme of the campaign, they're going to have to bring something from each nation together. So from the Tech Nation, the Keepers coming together to stand, Alrod was from the Tech Nation. So that's one bid for the Tech Nation. The Grasslands, humans. There were humans involved with all of this, which Clara's father was a human. The Mountain Nation had one of their immortals from their army come to stand together. The Forest Nation was Claude. Claude was from the forest. Hilltop Nation's Warforged was used. The Cold Nation had a Goliath champion. So the Goliath from the Mountain Nation was a Goliath. Again, the nations coming together. Swamp Nation had Claude. The Island Nation had that merfolk sorcerer that I said, and the Xander was the Desert Nation Scion mental caster. So everyone was there except the Coastal Nation. Nobody was there from the Coastal Nation, was left the crack in this coming together to fight off Abraxas and truly stop him. So if they had somebody from the Coastal Nation, maybe they could have stopped him right there. But that's for the players to figure out. And now Claude's plan was to take the Forest Nation's Dream Crystal from Abraxas and get out of there, just to weaken him just a little bit, because Abraxas had that Forest Nation Dream Crystal. This is not the source of his power, it's just amplifying his power, because the source of his power at this point now is the nightmare energy that's flowing into him from all this bad stuff that's happening. So Abraxas only stood a chance because of that gap in the 10 nations, and he was starting to win. But then I want you to imagine the big Thanos struggle whenever all of the Doctor Strange, Spider, everybody's trying to stop him and get everything off, and they're trying to start pull the gauntlet off. And they're all coming together, and they have that type of moment. And Claude gets the crystal off of the staff of Abraxas, and then gets out of there and just leaves. And Abraxas starts to lose at that point. They start to kind of get the edge over him, losing that crystal. And Abraxas pulls his trump card. He pulls his trump card of ripping open a rift. So he wasn't going to be able to wipe out the entire Hilltop Nation, but he could at least destroy the land of it. So instead of getting the people and the land like he had done with the desert and the island nation, he slams the rest of whatever energy he has into the ground to start to rip open a literal scar in the world through the Hilltop Nation, ripping down and destroying the land. So in this big moment, this rift is torn again and causes another one of those nightmare pulses to come out and happen. Huge nightmare pulse leaves a scar on the land. It's like the Grand Canyon type rip through the center of what used to be the Hilltop Nation, and the people were saved, but the nation itself was not. This is what created the Wanderers. At the beginning of the campaign, whenever I tell the players, I was like, there's 5 nations, and then there's this like band of wanderers that just travel around. They don't really there's just a bunch of this like populace of people that are just wandering around. They're savages. They're called the Wanderers, when really they're not too savage, and they are the Hilltop Nation's people that have left without a nation, right? Meanwhile, the Swamp Nation, and this is all while this is happening over here, the Swamp Nation slips into darkness, and the lichens and the rot and everything from the Forest Nation, all of this rot and disease and plague and lycanthropy starts to get lose control of it. The swamp slips into darkness, and the lichens go off, and they go towards the Cold Nation, which is right next to if you remember the map, the Swamp Nation's right next to that Cold Nation, and so the lichens start to roam out to hunt for more, and this is where Nightmare Pulse happens from the Swamp Nation and the Cold Nation. So now this is now 3 Nightmare Pulses happening at the same time, and these are the 5 nations that I told you that were gone at the beginning. The first 5 nations I told you about were the 5 that the players have no idea about. This is the culmination of all of that. The Nightmare Pulse from the Hilltop Nation, the Nightmare Pulse from the Swamp Nation, and the Cold Nation, ripping out through the entire. And now Claude has the Forest Crystal. He's racing across. Again, as far as the timing of this goes, Claude would have taken the stone, and he's running away, and he's trying to get towards where he has the Forest Crystal, and he wants to awaken the Warforged to try and help stop Abraxas. So Claudius shifts into a bird and is flying back to the Swamp Nation. Korin has the Forest Nation Warforged ready and waiting for Claudius to come there. He sends her a message. He's coming there. The rifts happen. It's like this movie cinematic timing situation where Claude gets there, he gets the crystal there, and he goes to place it into the Forest Nation's chest. He places it in there right as all the nightmare purple domes of energy pass over and wipe their minds clean, and they forget. And Claude had shifted into a cat. He's stuck in a cat form, as a druid stuck in cat form. This very powerful witch of the Swamp Nation has had her memory wiped, and right as the Forest Nation Warforged activates, pulsing out to scan the average personality of those around him, he's in the middle of an empty Swamp Nation with 2 people who just had their memories wiped, and is a true blank slate and has nothing to average himself off of, which is the player Q, the barbarian. Warforged has literally no personality. He's a true blank slate, and he's going to roleplay like that. And that's one of the players that was activated in the middle of this forest. And I described to the player, you wake up next to an old woman that seems lost and confused, and this strange muddy cat that just runs off. And that's all I told them. He has no idea of what just happened. This nightmare rift pulsing world battle of Korin and Lavishtar through Abraxas, who's fighting, and the keepers are standing against him. He has no idea of any of that. And this small little cat now, Claudius, runs off and tries to find something. He has no idea. It's just a cat. He's just a cat. He's smart, but he just thinks he's a cat. Imagine if you were to be a druid, shapeshift into a cat, and then have your memory wiped. You'd still have the intellect of a human, but you just amnesia. You don't know that you're a druid. You don't know that you can cast spells. So it's an interesting little curveball. This little cat makes its way to the Tech Nation and finds Clara, the artificer. Clara, the artificer, finds this little cat, and every once in a while it does weird magic stuff whenever it gets scared or whenever it has these weird emotional spectrums of this uncontrollable weird magic that it casts. That's strange. And that's one of the things that she said in her backstory of having this little magic cat that's now connected into all of this. And then her father is one of the people who created the Warforged themselves. Her father was a master artificer whose grandfather, so her grandfather was one of the ones who created the Warforged, and there's schematics that she's like, there's little clues and stuff for. So those are two of the players, and the other two players, one of them is from the Mountain Nation, who saw a vision of this cave, this weird cave structure deep in the Mountain Nation. It looks like it's had some sort of magic being cast on it. What's actually happening, the player has no idea. What's actually happening is this magic is sealing away some sort of nightmare force that's trying to come out of this cave, because that cave leads to a ruins of an underground situation, underground ruins, underground society that has long been forgotten of this all happening before. All of this has happened before. This is not the first time it's happened. You can think back of Halo, of the Sovereign, or Mass Effect Sovereign type thing of these entities, this dream energy and this conflict of this nightmare and dream energy has happened before. This cycle has happened before of all civilization being wiped out and then reset in some way over time. And it's happening again. The 10 nations have already dropped down to 5. And now it's happening again. And in the mountains, there's these ruins, this underground thing that's trying to be sealed off of of evidence of this all of happening before, which is another weird big layer to the big picture of this whole thing. And then so one of the players is from the Mountain Nation and saw this vision and gets this flash of light, and flash of this nightmare energy escapes and gets into him and onto him, and then he has to, they see him, they try to catch him because they want to help him, because he just has this negative nightmare energy put into him, but he runs away, and he runs away to the Tech Nation. And the artificer joins the Tech Nation army. The artificer barbarian makes his way to the Tech Nation to try and figure out what's going on. He's made of tech, but he hides it. He hides himself. He has an illusion that he puts over himself so that nobody can see him. And he hides that fact, and he acts like he's just a normal human. He puts armor on over his own mech body so it can hide it. He has an illusion of a thing that he's able to find, a magic item to hide his face, and he keeps that a secret. And literally the other two players at the table don't know. There's 4 players total. He confided that information in one of them, but the other 2 players don't even know he's a Warforged at the start of this campaign. They think he's a human barbarian. Everything's normal. And then the 4th player is a wizard. Wizard who has this green mage tome book, that's some strange green book that he has, and is able to cast nature magic out of, which is a wizard, but he is actually a warlock. All the rest of the players think he is a wizard, but he's actually a warlock, and he has some sort of patron that deals with nature and dreams and magic in some weird way. He doesn't really know about that, and that's a question mark for another time that I'll post in that video for the player's backstory. But that's how all of these players kind of weave together into this world of these. They told me things about their backstory, and I weave them together in a weird way. Also, how could I forget this? That the warlock player, is a Kalashtar from the Desert Nation, and his whole backstory is all tied into, but he has amnesia because he woke up the Desert Nation. He left the Desert Nation, and that pulse that went out, he had forgotten his entire childhood of whatever happened, and he's going to have to slowly unlock that too, because he's from the Desert Nation where this whole thing went down, and it's this weird mirage place now that he can't ever go back to and can't remember anything from. So the big picture now, Abraxas retreats back to the Forest Nation to kind of lick his wounds from losing and not having the Forest Nation's Dream Crystal anymore, because the Forest Nation Dream Crystal is inside the chest of Q, one of the players, right? It is damaged from the whole process, though. And the world is now seen as a fraction of what it once was. The players only think that there's 5. And at the very start of the campaign, I described the Forest Nation as being this weird fallen nation that's in the process of falling, and it's almost like the Bermuda Triangle. The forest and things inside the forest, it's like a Bermuda Triangle. When things go in, but they don't come out, it's weird. And I described it like that. So I was like, basically there's 4. So I literally described to them a transition from 5 nations to 4 nations. And within the first couple sessions, I think at session 3 there was this big pulse of purple energy, and the Forest Nation fell, and there's only 4 now, and they had to make intelligence saving throws to see if they could remember. But each of the 4 of them have a reason why they can have a chance at remembering. Clara has her pet cat Claudius has that swamp crystal that she has as this little gemstone that she saw on his neck as a little thing he had. And she has the Swamp Nation's crystal to help her be able to keep her own memories. Q is a Warforged, so he's of course going to be able to keep his memories. Ivar, the person from the mountain range that saw that flash of nightmare energy, has this energy inside of him already to kind of help keep his memory. And the Warlock has a patron who is helping him to keep his memory. So each of these 4 players have reasons why they're able to remember stuff. So in session 3, huge pulse of purple energy, and there's no more Forest Nation. Although they didn't figure that out immediately. They were talking with other people, and they're like, "What are you talking about, Forrest? What are you talking about? There's no what? There's no nation. There's no nation of Galger. What are you talking about?" And they were like, "Whoa!" So like, and they had to even double check and ask me at the table, like, "Didn't you say?" I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So, really interesting to see them start to figure out like what's happening, what's causing all of this stuff. So. The last big piece here is there is a church in this world that is trying to help each nation be able to better help themselves and spread the word and all this kind of stuff, helping out things where they can, providing food and defenses and healing type stuff. But the church is led by someone who is basically the avatar of this nightmare energy, and they are following the same type of nightmare type fear and memories type of situation that is they are posing as a church. Classic trope in storytelling. Oh, the church is evil. Oh God, of course. But they're trying to hide the truth of what's going on, and the church nation is following around, erasing evidence of there ever being these other nations, and they're trying to help this whole nightmare overtaking happen and erase all the memories. The Wanderers are the group of people that knows the truth and are trying to get to the bottom of this, but they keep being pinned as the bad guys because the church uses this memory type nightmare magic to change people's memories and start to mess with people's minds. So I'm trying to have the church be this good viewed thing where they're very helpful and all the stuff. And actually in some of the more recent sessions, they are starting to kind of trust the church a little bit. And they even gave up one of their party members, NPC friends that they made to the church. And they helped they trusted them a little bit, which we'll see where all that goes. So the big nation, the 5 nations that's gone down to 4 nations, which were really 10 nations. The Wanderers, who are a group of these savages who really aren't savages. They're actually fallen people that are trying to help everyone else around them. All of these little twists and turns, all weaved around characters' backstories, which you can check out the character backstory video down in the description. By the time I post that, I'm going to be posting videos once a week to kind of get this whole thing rolling. If you want to check out all the videos and get up to speed immediately with all this whole thing, you can Patreon gets access to the videos as soon as I make them, and you can check it out there. I appreciate all of that. I want to see what you guys think. I've never shared a campaign like this before. I've never shown this. I mean, it's personal. Like this is a really cool thing to be able to share with you guys. Like I want y'all to see behind the scenes of what I'm trying to make here. I'm not running a module. I'm not doing, I always usually homebrew stuff, and I based it entirely around my players' backstories. I have like 2 different videos on the channel, on my main channel, that I talk about doing that. And this is me showing you guys, and I want to show you guys this. I want to show you guys my successes, my failures, things that go well, things that go terrible, and learn from both of them, myself and you guys. So join along in here. I'm excited to see what this turns into. Stay creative. Think outside that box. Peace.